So avoiding looping in your tracks is one of the key skills that you're going to need to master if you want to be competitive in the TV film licensing business. Why is that? Well, when you submit your tracks to a library, remember what we are doing is creating what is called production music, meaning our music needs to be usable for use in productions, TV shows, movies, and commercials, right? Any video editor who's editing a TV show, a reality show, a promo, a commercial, a trailer, it doesn't matter what it is. They obviously are going to have access to your audio files that you submit to your library. So let's say it's a WAV file, full 48K, 24-bit WAV file or 16-bit. So if there's one particular part of your track that they love, but you only did it once, that's as simple as in, out, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. They can run that over and over and over again, as many times as they need to, okay? But you don't need to be supplying to them, an entire track full of a looped progression, right? You create a 4-bar sort of riff or something like that, and you just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. They can do that. They don't need that. What you need to do is supply them with as many options as possible, okay? So that if they do want to pick and choose this part here, that part there, this verse, that chorus, they can rearrange it and extend it as long as they need it, okay? You don't need to do that for them. All you need to do is basically see one track that you produce as a series of maybe 8 or 10 or even 16 mini tracks within it, so that this part of the verse can stand alone, that part of the verse is different from the first part. The chorus comes in, we build up on the second half of the chorus, we go to the bridge, we break it down, we build up the bridge. When we return to the chorus, it's now a new kind of a chorus. We have new elements, we have something else happening, so that the track by itself doesn't feel like we're just on a treadmill. Because first of all, that's boring, it's not really that interesting, and it's not really capturing the attention or the interest of somebody listening to it, let's say a music supervisor or a video editor. So in the grand scheme of things, that's one of the biggest reasons why we want to avoid the looping process. And there's two different essentially ways to do that to make sure basically your track structure has that ebb and flow, right? Has those dynamics where you're growing, coming down, and expanding on what you did before. But obviously within, let's say, your drums, you can be adding new elements throughout your 4 or 8 bar pattern so that it's not literally kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, back and forth over and over again. But there's some variation in your drums as you go from one section to the next, so that even within sub-instruments inside your mix, there's still interest, pushing everything forward and grabbing the attention of the listener, okay? This is why music licensing is in its own lane. Why most music producers who have been just making beats for artists or songs for themselves for their own fan base usually don't get into this kind of stuff, because it's specifically tailored music for the licensing business. But I will tell you this, if you master this stuff, your artist music or your beat making abilities or whatever it is you do outside of music licensing, I can guarantee will be 1,000 times stronger. Learning this stuff over the years that I've been in this industry has absolutely taken my production quality up so many levels for even my own personal projects that I do for myself or for other artists that I work with. So even though this is specifically tailored for the licensing business, these skills will help you across the board as a music producer. So I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit of this track. And as we go through it, I'm going to basically start pointing out every 4 to 8 bars, the changes and the little variations that you're hearing that's allowing this track to capture the interest and not loop itself to death and not bore the listener to death, and how I specifically crafted this track to make sure that it was very interesting and licensable for a TV show or a promo. This was an EDM/orchestral hybrid track, so it's kind of an interesting mix of two different genres. And I'll show you as I went along all the different elements that I created to ensure that this did not get stagnant and I didn't get stuck on that looping treadmill. So let me go ahead and click play and we'll get started here. Right before we go into the chorus, let's just break down what we've heard so far. A lot of building already happening within the first couple of seconds of this track, okay? First and foremost, you notice that everything is color coordinated. All my drums are in red. I have my horns, my accent leads, trombones, guitars are in orange, sound effects are in brown. I have some vocals here in blue. I like color coordinating, and I certainly am a fan of labeling your tracks what they are, rather than this being audio 1, audio 2, audio 5. When you're going back and adding new things and mixing things, you need to make sure that everything is very, very organized. So I'm telling you, this is one of those habits you want to just get in the habit of creating when you start with your DAW. And it doesn't matter. Any DAW will allow you to customize colors, make the track certain colors, make the audio or MIDI file certain colors. So whatever you're using, find out how to do it. And with Logic Pro, all you got to do is you highlight everything you want in one color, right click. Oops, we're not going to do that. I think actually, rather than that, it's Option C. If you pull up Option C, you'll be able to color code anything. You want these all to be blue, whatever. I usually just do red for drums. That's just kind of what's good for me. But this is going to keep me very organized, especially when I'm teaching you, but also when I want to do alt mixes or other sort of versions of this song in the future. I'll be able to find things super quick. You got to realize that your time is money in this business, so stay organized. It's really important. All right, back to the track. So we're going to zoom in just a little bit here, and we'll just kind of see what's going on in the very beginning of this track. So as you can see, I did one 4-bar progression of our marching snare drums basically right there, just to kind of bring us into that stadium, sports arena. I want that to be the sort of initial vibe that you get from the song. But immediately in the next 4 bars, I'm adding some huge horn stabs, some trombone hits, a guitar, and a sound effect crash basically that just kind of really adds to the sort of intensity and seriousness to the track. So 4 bars in, I'm already creating new interest, right? So that's what you need to be thinking about with your tracks, and you need to grab people's attention very quickly. And it would probably have been a mistake for me to even loop this 4 bars one more time. It's just like, we've already got it, because you guys know that if they wanted just this cool drum line feel, they can just right? They can just take that, copy and paste it over and over and over again. Now, if they wanted something that's a little bit more serious and heavy, right? That one doesn't loop as well, but they can obviously, take maybe 2 of the first half of this one, or maybe this whole one, and then you have this nice little turnaround here where I have this drop, the drums drop out, and now we're ready to enter even another change in the track. So obviously I'm adding and changing and obviously creating a little bit of a gap right here with drums. Using these rests, like basically having your drums march along and then, at the end of a 4-bar progression, taking a measure off to just rest the drums for a second, to bring them back in, is an effective way to create interest, to make sure you're not looping the same drums over and over again. It's really popular in hip hop. A lot of genres do something like that. So right before we go to that second part, now I've added a new lead. So I've stacked up trombones and guitars to make this really cool lead that you haven't heard yet. So I liked how those two kind of matched up together. It has that sort of marching feel with the trombones, and then the guitars add a little bit of the edgy rock. And I do have these big horn stabs that just add the sort of bass melody to this part of the track. Okay, so now we're starting to build a musical direction with the track. And again, new lead, a new progression right here. So this is all new. The drums are fairly the same. As you can see, not much going on, but I do have some of these swooshes that kind of come in at the end of the progression. This one I probably actually would add as well. So I probably would put that one right there to make sure that basically it's kind of like a little drum fill that leads you into that next part. Now, as we go to even one more 4-bar progression, again, you can see there's a new lead sequencer happening. There's a new sound effect happening, and we start incorporating some pretty intense sound effects that'll actually help build us up into the chorus. So let's take a listen. Okay, so right before we go to that chorus, A little bit of an extended, we have these basically two measures that are left, or I say up here rather. So we extended a little bit of a pause before we go to that chorus. So rather than just hitting the chorus on the 1, which would have been right here, right? That's where you kind of expect the chorus to go. Surprise your listener just a bit, okay? Don't get too creative and fancy with, you have a quarter half note rest or something that just feels a little bit off. But taking a 1-bar rest, a 2-bar rest, and adding some cool sound effects, which I'll get into here, is a really cool way to surprise your listener a bit, add some interest to it, and also give them that option. If they want to actually start your track, let's say like right here, with this cool build-up into the chorus, they can. Right, so you give them that option as well. Or if they want to get out of this part, they don't want to go into that lead up, they can actually have the track end right here. Right, and then they can fade that out if they need to. Obviously, this one is still kind of playing through. But I just have this interesting stutter effect that kind of builds up towards the end of it. And I did have that automated so that it's actually growing a little bit, drops down for our little drop down, and then of course it builds up right towards the start of our hook there. Same thing going on with the sequencer, it just adds a little bit of that kind of tension and that interest going through. And then just simple riser and drop down right here. And again, I'm not copying and pasting the same riser every 4 bars. That would be too much. We would have heard that way too many times. So if you have these big buildups and these big drop downs, you want to kind of save those for the big epic sort of release that we want to do here. And this has been nothing but, if you look at it, a huge buildup to this chorus. That's basically what the first part of this track all is about. So if I want this to be an epic buildup, I'm going to leave some of my sound effects towards the very end here. So it's just one of those things to make sure that you are thinking about your track in terms of an entire roller coaster ride that somebody's going on, okay? You wouldn't have this huge epic buildup every 4 bars. That's not how a roller coaster works. A roller coaster leads you up, leads you up, leads you up, and then there's a nice big release, right? And that's what we're going into right now with the chorus. So let's break this chorus down. I'll hit play on it and we'll see what's different now that you haven't heard before. So obviously you can tell here that we've now introduced a EDM kick that we didn't hear before. Super simple, just write down on the 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually in EDM, that's what you want to do. I wanted to create a little bit of that bounce, that EDM bounce to this track, so that's why I threw that in there. And now we obviously have some pulsating synths here that are actually being side-chained compressed. You can learn about that in another tutorial here in the Academy. But basically I have this one. I guess it's just this one for, actually I think both of these. I have them side-chained so that they're kind of pumping in between the kicks. See how they get a little bit louder once the kick's not there, because that kick is kind of basically pumping it back and forth. When you don't have the kick, then it just fully releases basically the volume. So this is some new elements you haven't heard before in this progression. And then obviously we have these vocal hays. These are the ones that you haven't heard before at all. So I've saved these for the chorus. So it's basically just one hay stacked on top of the other. Kind of a low hip hop hay with a higher shout hay. So now you feel what's going on there. So basically that's what's just getting our party started here for our chorus. Then I add this new lead. So this is that lead that just kind of has this really crazy wild, kind of ramps up and then stutters and comes down. So of course you remember this lead. This is sort of like hinted at before when we had our verse. So So now I've brought it back, sort of a thematic lead melody. You can still have these sort of catchy thematic leads in music licensing, but they just need to be placed and properly put there. So this one I did add a second or a third sort of a Vox sound. Again, to make sure that my drums aren't just doing the same thing over and over again, I give myself a little pause right here. As you can see, I took out the kicks. These are the kicks right here. Let your drums do the rest of the work. Let the kick take a break. And when it comes back in for the chorus, or the verse rather, it feels like an impact, right? Part of dynamics and part of making sure you don't have too much looping going on is giving the listener a break, right? If something's relentlessly just pounding away in your track over and over again, take it away for a bar, for 2 bars, for a little while. Bring it back. You got to do this sort of, deliver and take away, deliver and take away. It's just this dance you have to start doing in your productions to make sure that you're adding that really cool interest along the way. And what I'm going to do is actually just play and solo out these drums so you can kind of hear how interesting they get. I'll start a little bit from the chorus before, and then you'll see how much all the different elements that I add to the second half of the chorus to make these drums much more interesting. So again, I'm not copy paste doing the same drums throughout the entire chorus. That would defeat the purpose of staying away from the looping sound. Very basic, very basic in the beginning, as you can hear. So as you can see, just going from very stripped down, almost nothing happening, to we have hi-hats, we have claps, we're putting, these sort of like panned out left and right hi-hats and stuff. So we've actually created a little bit more of a stereo image. So we are doing a lot here to basically bloom and blossom and develop these drums in and of themselves, so that even the drums, if you solo those out, they wouldn't feel like we're too stuck on a loop and it's just doing the same thing over and over again. It's a really important skill to make sure that you start to develop. So we go back to our second verse and make sure we do things differently from the first. So let's check that out. So it's very similar in many ways, as you can see at the beginning. Except for we didn't hear this sort of progression from our horns before. So right here. So again, that just adds a new element. So if they wanted something that kind of sustains like that and kind of leaves you with a little bit more tension, they can. Or if they just want the straight up hit, we gave them this option here. So basically what you could do is copy and paste this whole 4-bar section here and then build up your horns. And that's essentially what I've done. I was like, I want something a little bit more interesting than just the because they already have that. So I'm repeating something they've heard before. Let me add to it. And this one, obviously, just by adding this cool melody with the trombones. And just before we talk about this transition, so you can see and hear I've added a new lead with the trombones, guitar, and this Vox lead, which you didn't hear on the first verse. Again, I want to add a different type of verse for whoever wants to potentially use this music. If they want this kind of a cool sound coming through the background, they can absolutely jump to this section. And I highly recommend you do what I'm doing here, which is stacking up various instruments together to create a really cool, interesting, unique sound, rather than just finding one lead or one trumpet or one trombone and then just using that as your lead. Try see what happens when you stack a synth on it and a guitar and a whole bunch of other really cool stuff. Get creative with how you stack up your sounds, and you'll find it'll really sort of take your tracks to a more professional level. Of course, with the drums, I started adding these claps to really start adding the intensity around this section. Now this turnaround here, if I zoom in, it's actually half as long as the first one. The first one was 2 bars. This is only 1 bar. So I basically shortened everything. So we have a drop down, an impact, and then we have this reverse coming back into our second chorus, okay? And the second chorus, right off the bat, starts with the lead. It starts with a different beginning than the first chorus. So already we're starting our second chorus just a notch or two above where we started the first one. And that's how you should be thinking about your choruses. Start from maybe like a level 5, build it up to a 7. When you come back to that chorus again, start at level 7. Start where you left off and build even further to it. That's how you're creating different choruses and different sections in your track. So here's the second chorus. So as you can see, we're building. We have this big crescendo, so we use a big reverse white noise riser right down here. And then we go into this deep 808 bass drop down, which is really, really impactful. This is a really popular thing in the licensing business. I do recommend you look for sounds like this. You start using sounds like this. It just adds this sort of like gut punch right at the end when you're going into your next part. So I think I have my bridge section here. Yep. So this is a section where the drums are somewhat familiar to what you've heard before, but you've never heard these trombones or these guitars or this melody that I'm starting to introduce. So I basically want to take you into a more subtle, subdued, kind of lower energy place, but build you right back up into our final chorus to give you that big final smack in the face right at the end. So as you can see, even on the second 4 bars, I started adding some harmonies to those trombones. Those were a singular sound, and then as I go to the second part, you start hearing this really cool harmony. All right, so a lot to unpack right there. So we have this big final crescendo where the horns are getting louder, the guitar is getting louder, the stuttering synth is getting louder. This sequencer right here starts to crescendo as well. Of course, we got all our risers and everything going on. And now we have a brand new drum fill that you haven't heard in any of the previous breakdowns. Remember, we had our 2-bar breakdown, then we had this 1-bar breakdown, but you haven't heard the breakdown with 1 bars and a drum fill in the middle. So again, I haven't even looped a 1-bar turnaround phrase that a lot of producers do. A lot of you guys do want to just copy and paste the same fill, the same thing you did over and over again. Get creative. This takes no more than just finding a cool drum fill, throwing it in to this little 1-bar turnaround. So if they want a little breakdown with a drum that's different than the one they had before, they now have that option, okay? And of course, we're gonna go into our final big chorus, the biggest one you've heard yet. As you can see, it's stacked up way bigger than all of the other ones. So we're already starting at a level 8 or even 7 or 8, and we're gonna rise it all the way up to the very end. So a last thing that I'll say before we finish this out is usually you want the end of your track to be the most epic, the largest point of the crescendo, the loudest, most intense part of your track usually should be that last chorus, the last section of that last chorus into the very end. That's usually how your tracks need to be structured. So one of the biggest things you're hearing that's different is I now have an open hi-hat, which I did not have on any of the other choruses. So that kind of thing that's pumping in and out. You did not hear that on any other chorus. So again, one instrument took my drums to even a higher level and just made it a little bit more kind of chaotic and noisy and just a little bit more intense for this last chorus. So those are the tiny little things that you should start incorporating into your track, not giving away too much too soon in the beginning of it, waiting till the very end. Again, being selective, taking things away and giving things at the appropriate times to make sure that the payoff is really working. So I had this just kind of nice ending there just to give it a little nice, neat bow around the end of it, and then we crescendo towards the end. This is the same loop that you heard in the second verse rather, but instead of going into another beat, we just end on the final hit of the track. Right? So this by itself could be a sting. So if somebody wanted to use this for just a quick sports promo, they could literally just find the end of this track and take this. Right? It's short, it's to the point, and there are a lot of placements in this business that are less than 10 seconds long. So something like that could be really useful for them. So as you can see, we have gone from a drum loop, a marching drum loop, to insanity basically towards the end of this track. So it's a journey, right? And all throughout this process, I hope you are taking notes on really interesting ideas and ways. Not a lot of work, not a lot of extra effort, but definitely taking that extra maybe 5 or 10% of time to just craft your track with new things being added, building on top of things, not repeating the same transitional sections over and over again, saving some of your big epic sound effects, reverse sound effects, crashes, impacts for when they need to be there, when you need to deliver or release for a chorus, etc., etc. And of course, maybe always including a bridge section that can kind of take us away from the main theme of the track, bring us down a little bit, but then bring us right back up so that we can finish strong with our biggest chorus that we have at the end of the track. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.